Poland on January the 7th, 1913.
Could you please tell me about your family before the war? How many people were in your family? Who comprised your house?
At the time, on September 1st, 1939, when the war broke out, my parents were alive, and we were 10 children. 6 of them were married, and 4 of them were single. There were 6 brothers and 2 sisters.
Could you please tell us something about your family's background, their education? Were they religious?
They were Orthodox Jewish people. They were educated people. They married children, most of them were business people. And the 4 unmarried, all of them were students attending schools.
What did your father do for a living?
My father was owner of a textile business, a wholesale textile business in Benjamin, Poland.
Did you grow up in a small town? Was Benjamin a big city, a
Benjamin
small town?
Benjamin should be considered as a big town under the European circumstances. It was around a population of 30-some thousand people, but by about 90% were Jewish people.
90?
90. I would say there was around 25 or 28,000 Jewish people in Benjamin.
Could you tell us something about your contacts with non-Jews before the war? Did you ever have any anti-Semitic experiences?
A lot. I mean, the worst years were, let's say, since 1933, since Hitler came to power. I wouldn't say under the government circumstances, but since the Hitlerism started to be alive in Germany, the anti-Semitic signs in Poland grew tremendously. For example, in 1938-39, you couldn't walk in the street anymore as a Jew. They were near every store. They didn't let customers go into the Jewish store. If somebody went in, they beat them up and so forth.
It would seem difficult to understand how they could do that in a community which was 90% Jewish.
You see, that's the Jewish people in Europe, you must understand that you cannot compare them to the American Jewry. You see, they were always afraid that it was not their country, and Jewish people as such, they are not people that are beating back or so forth. So, and they were the strongest, even they were a minority.
As the war came closer, did you or any members of your family have a chance to leave, to get out of Poland?
No, not whatsoever. First of all, there was no country, where could you go, but no country would give you a visa for no specific reason. For example, if somebody was a very big businessman or an owner of a very big factory and got connections with abroad, so he could apply, for example, for business reasons. It was also hard to go. And normally the Jewish people were sitting in their place, and they didn't look to go, and then there was no possibility to go. It's only a minority was people they could afford, for example, tickets and so. And then the families were in the same town, children and all the families around, so they didn't look for any reason to go out. And then the main thing is this, I mean, there were rumors on the newspapers what Hitlerism means, but nobody expects that this will go to such an extent. And then when the war broke out, and when we were closed up, and that's it.
How old were you when the persecution began?
If you figure I was born in 1913, in 39, so I was 26 years old.
How did you first learn about the war? How did you find
You see, a week before, well, now we have to go into politics, you know. A week before, so there was a mobilization in Poland. We still didn't believe that it was the war started, you see, but let's say in the morning of September 1st, 1939, by 5 o'clock in the morning, in our town was, I would say, by 15 kilometers, which you consider this as around 9 miles from the German border. So, as I mentioned, on September 1st, 1939, 5 o'clock in the morning, we heard the radio that the German army overran all the border towns, Poland's border towns.
How did your life begin to change at that point in the life of your family? Could you tell us, at that point you were 26, but you were not yet married. Am I correct?
Not, yes.
How did it begin to change in the life that you
You
led
see,
with your
I will
family?
tell you, I used to work for, let's say, for 7-8 years in a neighboring town, Katowice, and I used to travel every morning from my town, Benjamin, to Katowice. But when the war broke out, my job stopped and everything, so everything changed.
Were you ever in a ghetto?
Yes,
Yes?
yes.
If
Yes, in our town, for example, we were from 1900. Now this is the tele. In 1939, when the war broke, was September 1st, we stayed in our apartments or in our neighborhood, let's say, till the middle of 1940. From 1940, they started the ghetto, and let's say they gave us 10 or 15 streets only for the Jewish population, and then was a Judenrat, if you know what this means. They created a Judenrat,
council.
a kind of Jewish council, and they gave them over the job to transfer the Jewish people from one section to the ghetto. We were in the ghetto till 1900, till August 1st, 1943. But from the ghetto, for example, they started to, as they call it, Aussiedlung, was they said to transfer Jewish people to other parts of Poland for labor, which was not true. They started, I would say, in 41 or in the middle of 41, to ask the Jewish Council to deliver them a few thousand people every 2 weeks, every month. And sometimes we got 3 months peace without asking this. And so they took out from the ghetto 2,000. They started first, the Jewish Council, I must say, they started first the very poor people. Then they took from the hospital the people. And then they started to took elderly people, which they couldn't help themselves by knowing people from the Jewish Council, to take them out. And so I would say when it came to 1943, August 1st, there were maybe a population back of 9 or 10,000 Jewish people, but by 15 or 17 they already liquidated.
Could you describe for us what it was like, what your daily routine was like in the ghetto, how you lived, and how did you get food?
But no, the Jewish Council, they issued stamps, not stamps, cards, for coupons. And then whenever you got, let's say, you got your ration every week, let's say a pound of sugar, 2 pounds of flour, or whatsoever, potatoes or something like this. Meat, forget about them. And this is people live them. They smuggled, they sold everything, got to the Aryan, to the Christian people, for silver, for gold, whatever they could, to accumulate some more food, and who died from hunger. And so
now we go on to the next level of experience. Were you in a concentration camp during the war?
if I was, yes, I gave you 6 concentration camps.
Could you describe how you got there from the ghetto?
Yes, and let me tell you this. This started, I was there, as I told you in the beginning, I was in a minor concentration camp. They call it an Arbeitscamp. This was not a camp which liquidated Jewish people, only labor, and then who survived. Who died from hunger or sicknesses died. But when we're coming back to Auschwitz, So we were, as I mentioned to you, around August 1st, 1943, around 10 or 11,000 Jewish people. There was a neighboring town, Sosnovitz, which is only, let's say, 3 miles from Belgium, and there were another 10 or 12,000 Jewish people, and there was another town on the right side of Belgium, Dąbrowa Górnicza, which was also 10. So they issued a story that they want to stamp the Ken cards, as I'll call it. No, have you been in Israel? The passports, let's say, to re-stamp and see what's what. And this was they fooled the Jews. They didn't fool them. There was no other choice. Say they issued an order that the entire Jewish population must appear on August the 12th, 1942. 1942 to stamp them their passports or whatever, their documents. And they told the Jewish people they must appear from a baby a day old till whatever, till a sick person, an old person, and the sports arena, like they have here, the big sport arenas, and they will stamp them, the passports. And surely, and there was 8 days before, there was in all the streets, how do you call it in English? That you call the people, they must appear, if not, who will summons. Who will not appear, they will be shot. And surely all of them went, because there was no other choice. From the ghetto, they permit you to pass the Aryan streets, the non-ghetto streets, to appear there on the sports arenas, and then they hold the people. They started from 7 o'clock in the morning till, let's say, there were children, sick people, till around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. When 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the Gestapo appeared, and they start to make a selection.
Excuse me, were you with your family at this point?
I was there. No, I will tell you this. I was there with my youngest sister. I knew, if I will tell you, it's unbelievable. I understood their purpose. And I was working in a factory, and I was a key man, as they call it, in our factory, which was taken over by the Germans. They put in so-called a commissarische Verwaltung, if you know what this means. They took away the factory from the Jewish people. They put in a German, and he was not the owner. The factory belonged to the Reich, to the government. And he was the manager there, and I was as an employee from the day they took it over. And we used to work for the German, for the military. So they need me, the factory need me very badly. So I was sure that always, whenever they will leave a few people in the town, they will have to leave me. So, but I knew what I was going to do. So I said, whoever wants to go, let them go. I closed up my parents in our apartment, and I put in 2 outside locks, pedal locks, that if they will look, they should see that nobody's inside, you see, because I locked them outside. And I took my fiancée, now my wife. I was married in 1942. And I told her, I must tell you that my wife is my niece. And when my oldest brother came from Sosnovitz, they lived in Sosnovitz, and they asked me my advice what he should do if they should go to the sport arena in Sosnovitz. I told them, in my opinion, you should not go. If this is true that only for the purpose to stamp the documents, I will see that you will have it thereafter. But if you will go, and if their purpose is to take the people to Auschwitz, so you have time. If they will shut you in the house, it's the same story as you would go to the sport arena and they will send you out. So, and my brother left with the idea that he will not go. And I told Mrs. Osmarin, we were engaged at that time, I told her, even your father will for any reason change his mind, but I am telling you, don't go. Close yourself up. She probably was there one person in the whole town of Sosnovitz which didn't go, and my parents didn't go. And I was only with my youngest sister. And then, this was on August 12, 1943, by 4 o'clock the Gestapo came and they start to select people. You see, and we used to have documents where we are working, in what factory. So they went by this if the factory is important for them or not. If you show them a card, a document from a factory which works for the army or so, so they released you, they put you on a side, and we were standing till 1 o'clock in the morning the next day. But in the meantime, you can imagine there were 8,000 people in one place with sick people and children without food. And God is good for Jewish people. It starts a rain that you cannot believe it, you know. And then by 1 o'clock, they let me out with my sister. And they let out in general, I would say, by 2,000 people, 6,000 or 7,000. They kept them for 3 days. They put them in empty houses under the control of the Gestapo and the SS, and after 3 days they sent them to Auschwitz. And what Auschwitz means, I mean, you know, Auschwitz, the word Auschwitz means gas and crematorium. And then the 2,000 or 3,000 people which were left in from August 1942, let's say in Benjin 2,000 or in Sosnowitz 2,000 or in all the neighborhood around 10,000, they liquidated at August 1st, 1943 with the slogan Judenrein. I mean, so Judenrein. So at that time, so we understood, and we knew what goes on, that is the last days.
I am curious to ask you how you had the feeling when your brother came to you. What gave you the feeling that...
I will tell you, first of all, I will tell you this, which nobody will ever mention to you. I was a businessman and I got connections, and I dealt with with an Aryan businessman, which they sent him to Auschwitz for some reason, and he was there 9 months and they released him. And he was sitting in my office and he told me what goes on. And then let me tell you this. If you see, for example, when they made an action there, as they call it, to Übersiedel, as they call it, to transfer from one place, as they said, for labor and so, if they kill, for example, they shot left and right, and they let you take you with you only, let's say, a small little piece of baggage, you know, with small children, sick children, people from the hospitals. I mean, you're not so full that believe they take these people. And then, for example, if they came the first day to our town, they went over to the street where the synagogue in the Beit HaMedrash was. And they didn't let go out one person from a street, let's say, which were 20 or 25 houses. And they started to put on fire on the synagogue. This was the first day in 1939 we are talking about now, in September 39. And they put on fire on the synagogue, and they didn't let out one person from the entire street. And they killed the people from the 20 houses. You know what I'm talking? And they, instead to use water, they use gasoline with their pumps, I mean, to extend the fire. So we knew where we are in. I mean,
What do you remember about the scene on the platform when you arrived at the camp in Auschwitz? What was it like?
You see, I want to tell you, to start with this. As I told you, then we were around, in the entire neighborhood, in all the few towns, we were around 12,000 people when they started August 1st, 1943, the Judenrein action. And I'm talking about myself. I went to the office on a Saturday and I got a passport to walk on the Aryan streets. When I went home Saturday afternoon, on this side, I got the yellow star here, but I still got in my pocket a permission to walk on the street. So an assessment was on the other side, so he called me over. And he asked me if I had a permission, so I showed him the permission. So he took it and he said, you don't need it anymore, and let me go. So I went through the ghettos, through the Aryan streets to the ghetto, Nobody bothered me. And then I went to the Jewish police to tell them the story that they took me away and they told me you don't need it and so. And then we expect that something is coming up. Some people told you that they saw trains on the train station, empty trains, you know, not empty trains. This doesn't mean trains for people to sit in. Only how you call it? Business cattle there. And so we knew something will go on. And we got prepared, so-called a bunker, you know, to go in if something happened. So we got, let's say, a buffet. From the buffet we opened. There was in the back, there was a door to open. And from there we went down to a closed-up basement without windows. At that time, so I went with my wife to my sister, which also they get only 1 block away. And my parents and all the other brothers and sisters, 2 brothers were in Sosnowitz and the younger sisters were with my parents. They also got a bunker. I mean, a bunker is for the German army, was it? You know what means a bunker. And then we put out people to watch. I mean, we went to sleep and they were outside if we hear some noise. By 12 o'clock, my brother-in-law called us and told him that there's something not kosher. They hear German languages and German voice. And half an hour later, we heard already shots. So then we went to the bunker. So we were in the bunker, I would say, in a bunker size, 4 yards by 10 yards. We were maybe 35 people with children. And we were lying there till the next morning, 7 o'clock. But the next morning they came into this particular house, and they they found the bunker. They put on pieces of paper with fire. They threw it down. So we start. I mean, the noise, and then they took us out, and they brought us direct from there to the train. And we are not too far from Auschwitz, around 36 kilometers, I would say, about 20 miles. And they took us to Auschwitz. In the meantime, some people tried to break out pieces of wood, I mean, to try to get out, to run out. So they shot quite several people, and then they took us out from the train, from the train, I believe you know how it. From the train, there were a commando from Auschwitz. A commando, that means a group of people, let's say the group of people was around a few hundred, and they called them the Canada, if you know what this means. And the Canada people, they rouse, they threw us out from, and then was already, let's say, I would say, 25 or 30 SS people, but a few high officers, and they start to yell, and then they told them they should throw away everything what they bought. So everybody bought something, a valise or something, to throw everything in some specific place. And then they start the selection, all around surrounding by the Gestapo, and they took out, let's say, in our transport, there was around 3,000 people. From the 3,000 people, they took out around 270 people, young boys and girls in age from 17 to 26, 27, something like this. And also they went by the face. And they made us, yes, you know, the right and left. On the right side, they put in the younger people, and on the left side, they put, or the contrary, the older people with the children. So sometimes they grab out a child from a young mother and threw the child there, and the young mother, they put him there, and if the mother didn't want to, she started to yell, and so they put her in the same place with the children. And there were trucks, buses, I wouldn't say buses, trucks, I mean open trucks, and they put down all the 2,700 people in the trucks, and they went direct to the gas chambers first. And the 270 people, the young one, they took us, we marched maybe an hour from the train to the concentration camp, which they called it Birkenau.
You were together with your sister at this point?
No, I was together with my wife. They
With your
picked up
wife.
with my wife. They took my wife to the let's say 150 girls, and I was between 150 men. And they took us to the men camp. There was a concentration camp for men, and there was a concentration camp for women. And when we came in, I mean, we knew what happens, but no, we met a lot of people, the Jewish people inside. They showed us the crematoriums. They told me, I mean, don't believe all the other stories. Your parents or whatever, your family left are now they're not alive anymore. And so.
Were you aware at this point about the whereabouts of the rest of your family?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Would you tell us about it, please?
No, we knew, I mean, you don't forget, we were under those circumstances from 1939 till 43. Killing, shooting, there was no problems in the hundreds or in the thousands. I mean, so and we knew where we are going. We knew people went, let's say, 2 years ago before us, in 40 or 41. You never heard from them anymore, you know. Even sometimes in Auschwitz they persuade us to write postal cards out that we are walking and we are feeling good, and so they forced us to do it. But I mean, after years, you should know what goes on. I mean, if they took out, let's say, 3/4 of the Jewish population, we knew what went down in Warsaw and Lodz and in the entire country of Poland or other countries. I mean,
Previously, the name of Mengele came up. Had you ever seen him at the selection
I saw him a lot of times, not only one time. At the selections when I came, he was not present. There was other doctors. But I was working in the office, as I told you before, in Auschwitz, and I was in an office which was, let's say, a group of 350 shoemakers and 350 tailors. And their purpose, their work was, for example, if they got 100,000 or 200,000 pair of shoes, a big pile, I'd say, till the sky. So they delivered to the shoemakers around 20,000 pair or 20 or 30, without counting shoes from the people they killed or from the people what the Canada selected out from the suitcases, and they send it over to this shoemaker command, and they select the new ones they send to Germany, and from the used ones they brought into the shoemaker block, and their purpose was, let's say, to repair from 1,000 to make 400, let's say, to take off good pieces from one pair replaced to another pair, you know. And then the same was with clothing. There was a tailor command from 350 people, and there were 6 or 7 people in the office, and I was one of them. So let's go to the question what you asked me.
About Mengele?
So Mengele came once to the office, and there was a capo, there was a head. He was a German. But he was a inmate too. That means he was taken out from the prison in Berlin. He was sentenced before Hitler came to power. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder. And then Hitler emptied out those prisons in Germany, and they sent him to the concentration camps. And there he became a big shot, a capo, over the Jews. And he came to the office when the capo was there, and he told him he was going to make a selection in the workshop. So he took out, at that time, 38 people, only by faces. And he took them with him, and my job was every morning to give a report how many people are working today in the boat shops, in the tailor shops, and the shoemaking. The purpose was this, because before we left there was an appel, they call it. They took all people from Birkenau out from the blocks, and a roll call, as you call it. And so they got figures, how many are working here, how many are working here, and how many are walking out, and they figured till the last one it must be German order, you know. So my job was every morning, in the morning, for example, from the evening after the roll call in the evening, till the roll call in the morning, some 20 or 50 died from our commander, from our two shops. So my job was to find out by the oldest of the blocks whom they delivered to the Krankenbau, so call it, to the hospital, which was nothing inside, and how many people died which they delivered for the crematorium. So my job was to take off those numbers and to tell them the numbers, to give the report how many numbers I have every morning. So those 36 people, the next morning I have to write them off because they never returned. And then I saw Mengele. Now we're going back to Mengele. On January the 18th, 19, 20, 21, there was a big selection, the biggest in Auschwitz. Not 41, 44. 44. 19, 20, 21, 44. There were order, the Jewish people are not marching out this morning. That means the Christians, the Aryans, whatever, they marched out to walk, but non-Jewish people, and all Jewish people remained in the blocks. And then there was the order, we have to go over to the blocks, to the washing blocks, I mean, where the baths are, not baths, I mean, where the toilets are. And there they undress us, and then came Mengele with two other or four other people with one writes the numbers, and then he made all of us were naked, and he looked if the body was already used up or it was some how you call it, rash or whatever. So they took the numbers. Practically we didn't knew which part is good. If the numbers what he writes down will remain, or the numbers what he does not write. But the end was that the numbers that they took down to kill. So then in the evening they took out, then this was Mengele. At that time he made a selection from, let's say we were left at that time, in Auschwitz were there, who knows, by 25,000 Jewish people or 30,000 Jewish people. Or I would say about 50 or 60% were taken to the gas chambers at that time, and this selection was done by Dr. Mengele. They kept the people for a day or two in the block, in separate blocks, and then the next day, it was say 2 days later, or 3 days later, they undressed them and took them in trucks naked.
To go back to the point about your job, you were working in the office. How did you get a job like that? How were you selected for that
I will
job?
tell you how I was selected. It went this way. We came to Birkenau in August, and we were there so-called in a quarantine. We didn't do nothing. We didn't work, only we lie in the blocks, and we got our piece of bread. It was 200 grams, 20 deco, I call it. On English scale, I don't know. And after a month, they came over and they picked up shoemakers and tailors for another block, for block D. We were in block A. This was the Continentals. I and my brother, the youngest brother, we decided we will say we are shoemakers, and I will tell you why. Because this not block only, this lager, this part of the lager A, there was the opening only with transports from our town. There was only people from our town, from Benjin, Sosnowiec, and the neighboring towns. So most of the people knew us. So I said, if there's 350 or 300 shoemakers, so I will be a shoemaker too. First of all, let me go out from here. And the story was this. I was an accountant in Europe, and I know very well German. So I said I went that I'm a shoemaker too, and nobody denied. I mean, and he picked up around 300 shoemakers. Then he said he's looking for so-called a Schreiber, an accountant. So then I went out and I told him, he was standing there, I was standing maybe a mile further away, and I told him that I am a Schreiber. So he asked me, I picked you up as a shoemaker. So I said no, and this was the first vehicle. So then he called the copper over and he told him he should take another shoemaker to complete the amount what he needs. And then I went from one part of the camp to another. This is to the B-lager. From one to another there was electric wires in between. When I came over, so there was other people in charge there, so they didn't give a damn that he picked me to work in the office. So I was working for the first month. I was working by bringing stones from here to there and from there here for no any reasons, only to be occupied, only to do something. I mean, the circumstances from beating and so there's no use to talk about, but killing is worse than beating, than getting beaten or so. But nevertheless, there was a story to it that there was a fellow from our town which was working in the office, and his job was in the morning to go into the shop and check all the numbers which are in. And he was missing one number, which he was a little bit of a prominent, everybody knew. We couldn't go out and in from the shop. But this particular person could, because he was known and so, but it happened that this particular person decided to run away, to go on an outside commando. You know what it means? We were walking with a sign EL. That means in lager. We couldn't go out to jobs or to walk outside the electric wires because they knew that we know the neighborhood, because it's only 30 kilometers from our town, that if we want to run away, we can run away, and we have people whom we know and we know the neighborhood. So there was an order for people from our vicinity must stay in camp. So this particular fellow, which was missing when the boy which was counting the numbers, so he was sure that maybe he went out, he went to the men's room or whatever he went. So he marked him down as he is here. And then he was trying to run away from where he was working outside, and they caught him. So they saw that his report was a false report. So they beat him up to death. But the next few days they were looking for another one, so the entire block was yelling Rosemary. So even I hid myself, I didn't want to go out. So then from that day I started to work in the office from the Bekleidungswerkstatt. Our job was to have a report in the morning, how many people are in the tailor command, how many people are in the shoemaker command, how many people went to the hospital, how many died during the night. Then it was our job, production job. We took from the pieces of cloth, we made some socks. There was 350 people working on this, or I pay suits or coats for what we repaired for the inmates. There was and all the time 60 or 80,000 people in Auschwitz. And the production, how many they produced. And shoes, how many shoes repairs, how many shoes they used up. And this was the job in the office. In the evening, again, to report the amount of people.
What was the number of the block that you were in, and what did it look like? Could you describe it, please?
How the block looks?
Yes.
All the blocks looks the same. So if I'll describe you one, all of them are the same. When you came in, there was wooden blocks. They were, I would say, 7 or 8 foot high. There were bunks. Let's say when you came in on the right side, you got a small little way between one block, between a left bunk and a right bunk. The bunk was on 3 parts, and they put in 4 or 5 people. Also only was wood. I don't recall if they were straw or not. I believe yes. And they put in 4 and 5 on the first part and the second part and the third part from the right side and from the left side. And they start again the same. And this was, let's say, such bunks. I would say 18 or 20 in one side, and 18 and 20 on the left side. And there was an oven in the middle. There was a brick oven, which was this height. It was cemented on the top from the beginning of the block till the end of the block. And there was an opening door to put in, to make fire on both sides. And this was the block.
This was used for heating?
Yes.
Was there a capo in your block?
Yes.
Did he sleep in your block?
No, the capo, you see, when you came in, there was a small little foyer, and there was a small little room for the capo. You got a separate room, not a capo. The capo was sleeping with all people together. Only maybe they got, instead 4 people, he was by himself, or with the people, if you know what the people is. With us a young boy, for his purposes. But this particular small little room was for the block eldest, I mean for the head of the block. There was a head of the block, and there was 4 or 5 people, cleaning people, which they went out. They did not go out for outside work. They stayed here. Their purpose is to go to bring, let's say, when the commanders came back from work from the outside before the appel, when they gave the people the soup, to bring the soup to give the people to distribute it and give them the pieces of bread, which they cut. For example, they cut a bread. Instead to give each one a quarter of a bread, the bread was made from the remains of when you saw wood. This was not flour. Yes. But what they did, for example, if there was a bread, to give you a quarter, they gave you a quarter, but they cut out the middle piece for themselves from each bread, you know? You know what I'm talking about? And then they split the quarters. And this bread they sold later for cigarettes, whatever. There was a business like Wall Street. Yes. You could sell your piece of salami from horse meat for a piece of margarine. You could sell margarine for a cigarette. This was between 5 o'clock after the people returned, after they got the soup, after the appel, till the time 8 o'clock you have to be in block and go to sleep. There was a market, a black market between.
How did the people in the block feel about the capo? What was their feeling towards him?
You see, it depends. I mean, for example, the capos were Jewish people too. You know, it was not only, there was German people, there was Polish people, there were Jewish people, capos. It depends on the individual. I mean, you see, sometimes you went to the block and a capo, first of all, a capo in the block had got nothing to say. A capo was only for labor. A capo doesn't mean that he got to do something in the blocks where he used to live, to sleep or got our food. A capo was only a head, only in the command where he took out the people to work. This is the difference between a capo and a oldest of the block, as they call it in German.
How were you able to take care of your physical needs in terms of washing or going to the bathroom?
I will tell you, there was the same. It was, let's say, the same. It was a toilet. The same way there was a special block to wash. The toilet, if you want me to describe, there was the same space as I told you, the oven. From one side of the block to the end of the block there were holes, but they were not straight holes. There was a hole here, a hole, but they shouldn't. So this was this toilet. The same was in the washroom. There was a basin from one block to the other, a wooden one, and you got the shower where you can have water.
Was there a discipline, a certain time of the day that they took the people to
No,
wash? Or when
there was no discipline at all. It's only, I mean, they were human beings. I mean, whoever disregarded washing himself, or so, though after 4 weeks or 6 weeks, was out. But who understood the circumstances? I mean, they went with themselves. There was no order or law that they have to go. You don't have to go.
You described the people that worked inside and the people that worked outside. Were there any attempts to escape?
A lot of them. First of all, let me tell you, attempts was a lot of them. But who succeed, I would say, in my 2 years of Auschwitz, I would say maybe 3 people, maybe 5 people escaped. And if 5 or maybe a few more, they were only Russian people, because they got connections from the outside. Or maybe 1 or 2 Polish people also, they got connections, I mean. But you must understand the circumstances. You were on the electric wire all around, like in a box with electric wire. If you went near the wire, so you got electrified and you were dead, and you were standing like the same way as you went near, and you were black like coal, and this you could get up in the morning, let's say, and go outside the block, and you could see near the electric wire 2 here, 2 there, 5 there. So this is for the people inside. Besides, you got the high stands. I mean, how you call it? I mean, the watching. So you got them with reflectors. So you got them with machine guns. 24 hours a day, every 20 meters or every 30 meters, one all around the block. Then I got another by 300 meters. A second one all around. And then if somebody escaped, so after a big preparation, he could, let's say, escape. So then, let's say he escaped by 4 o'clock, by 9 o'clock, by 10 o'clock in the morning. You see, by 5 o'clock you got up the roll call. So if they saw one was missing, so they kept the entire group from tens of thousands of people standing till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, until they came searching with dogs and so, or they caught him, or they decided, so they found him a day later, or they found him 2 days later. Because even, first of all, most of them were dressed in the blue-white stripes. They were without hair, you know. They got here, they call it Aloysestraße, you know, they got here a pass, besides to recognize, they call it Aloysestraße, you know, that they walk from Auschwitz, they call it this way. And where to hide. And when they shot him, and they put in a shovel on the back to hold him so. And the entire camp marched, they took out the entire camp to march over and to show the people what happened if somebody escapes, you know. You understand what I'm saying? So there was no way, but sometimes they brought him alive and then they hanged him in 2 days later or 3 days later. And they hanged him also in front of the entire group of the camp.
Did you ever see any children in the camp?
In the camp? Children as such, no. Young children in the age of, let's say, 12 to 14, maybe there were 10, as they call it, which they send messages between one block or so. For what reason, I don't know. I saw children, I would say yes. There was a camp a gypsy camp, where they kept only gypsies. The gypsies they kept, let's say when I came, was the gypsy camp. And the sea lager, they kept entire families together, with children, with musical instrument, with everything. So they were with children. until they liquidate them in one night, they killed all the gypsies. This was in 1944. They came in and they took out 7,000, in my opinion, young gypsies, and they told them that they are taking them to another place for labor. They put them in a train. They took them away about 10 miles further from Auschwitz. Then they grabbed all the elderly people with the children, with the sick people, and they gassed them, and then they brought back the 7,000 to the gas chambers because they didn't want to start while the young gypsies, the more power people were in together.
Did you ever have anyone special that helped you get through? Many people talk about a support system, that they survived because there was someone there always helping them at times, whether it was getting food or...
And let me explain to this. The ration and food in Auschwitz was the same for Jewish people, for non-Jewish people. For top political people, they got, like for example, when I was there, was a few Polish ministers, and they got all of them, but the difference that the Aryan people, they became packages from their family or from their house. So they were permitted, I believe, twice a month to get, so they got food and I wouldn't say cigarette because this was not permissible, not medicines, but they got like fat and onions and fruit and whatever. So they could, to combine 2 packages a month from the family with the food, what they got there was possible to survive. The Jewish people was this. For example, if I was walking between us, if I was walking in the office of the tailors and the shoemakers, which they were in a lucky situation because if they, let's say, open a shoe to repair another shoe, so sometimes they found a piece of gold under the soles, or you could have find under here some paper money or whatever, or you found sometimes the buttons, where the buttons instead buttons were pieces of gold or so, and then you would be able to sell it to Aryan people, not inmates of the camp, which they came from the outside, not as people from Auschwitz, engineers or whatever, and you sold them to them, and they brought you the next day a piece of bread or a piece of salami, or some cigarettes, and so went the business. Then for example, then was this undercommander. You know what this undercommander was? This was the commander which took the people to the gas chambers. So or the Canada, which they select all the things what the people brought in. So in a way, if they could hide something, if they knew today, they are able to bring in because they checked them when they came from the outside inside, or hide somewhere, but nobody was looking at that time. So he brought in. So he sold it. Or could it be a diamond or whatever? So he sold it to an outside Aryan, and he brought him the next day. So then a few days he got something else, and so it was. So this way, if somebody got more food than the person who did not got the access to those things, so the people who got the access could help some other people. For example, there was a lot of boys which they walk in commandos, where they got access. For example, they assorted the jewelries, the watches, and they stole a few, and they were lucky to bring it in, and they sold it. So they got enough food. So they picked them up, a girl without knowing her name, only through the wires, and he sent it over to people. They went sometimes from the men's camp to the women's camp. So he sent her a package of food and so on, but not knowing who she is. But he picked himself this particular girl, and he sent her food. This was the way it was. Normally, the ration was for all of them the same.
Was there a particular experience, one in particular, that stood out in your mind from the experience in Auschwitz? One? outstanding experience that you would share with us?
I would rather you should give me more specific what you have in mind.
Perhaps something that happened to you or to a member of your family, something that remained with you.
Specific, I can tell you this. For example, in January 1944, so my sister was in the women's camp, and I got knowledge that she was marked down to be sent to the gas, and I used up, because I was working in the office, I knew quite a few people, and I used up some people I know, and they worked it out, they took her out from the list, and she was running temperature, so the next day they rechecked her again, and they took her back. So this was in.
You were able to help your sister?
No, I helped her for 2 days only, but 2 days after they rechecked her and they took her back to the group, which were, as I told you, they were holding the people for 3 days after they registered the numbers, so they put her back.
What was the distance from the women's camp to the men's camp? What was the...
It was quite a walk. It was quite a walk. I would say 2 miles for sure. It was quite a walk. But let's say, for example, in Birkenau we are talking about. You must understand there's a difference between Auschwitz and Birkenau. Auschwitz was a few miles further from Birkenau, but Auschwitz was the show-off camp.
Showplace.
The show place, when they got commissions, let's say from the Red Cross, from Switzerland or whatever, so they brought them over to show them Auschwitz there, but Birkenau was the liquidation camp. So this Auschwitz was camp A, B, C, D, E, I would say, or F, yes. A was the camp only when they brought the people in the first month. They hold them without any labor, only not doing nothing, only not to eat, and that's it. Then was the B camp, was at my time, they got people from Czechoslovakia, all the families, and most of them, they got twins there. The purpose is, this was Dr. Mengele's purpose. They took out, they kept twins, and until when they were finished with all their experience, what they did, then they liquidated, they gassed them, the entire camp. The C was the gypsy camp, the D was the camp which they took me from the A camp after a month to the D camp, for the D camp was the labor force where they took out the people to outside work. And then was the C camp, I don't remember what it was, then was F camp, there was the Krankenbau, this was they call it like a hospital. Like a hospital, what you got in the hospital is toilet paper as bandage, and maybe a few aspirins. This was, but not aspirins you have to buy for bread, if you want it.
Were you still with your brother at this point?
I was all the time with my brother.
The whole time you remained
Yes.
there. So after Auschwitz, then from there...
After Auschwitz, they sent us when the Russian starts to invade Poland, when they were afraid already, or the Russians are near Auschwitz. They start to send every few days another 2,000 out to other camps. So on October 24, 1944, they sent us to Berlin, near Berlin. This is the Henkelwerke, what I mentioned to you. There was a factory, Flugzeugavion, how you call it actually, airplane factory. So we stayed there only for 10 days because they didn't get a place for us. Then they sent it to Oranienburg, which is also near Berlin. It also was an airplane factory. And then they sent it to Kofering, which was a branch of Dachau. And then we stayed there till the 24th of April 1945. in April 1945, is date what I mentioned, so I was working in the office there too. I was working in all places